Hello. Don't you find that there is something so deeply pleasurable about completing a self-designated reading challenge? And I've just finished one. I've now read all of the novels shortlisted for this year's Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize. I've been reading these books over the past couple of months, and so now I'm ready to give my prediction for what I hope and think will win this year's award. And the winner is going to be announced on September 11th, so it's not long before we find out if I'm right or if I am very wrong. But if you've read some or all of these books, I would love to know your thoughts about them in the comments below. And if you have any predictions for what you want to win this year's award, I would love to hear about that. So I'm going to give my rankings of all of these books later on in this video, along with my prediction. And I previously made a video giving an overview of this award and giving my reviews of these three books. So if you want to know more of my thoughts about these ones in particular, I'll put a link to that video in the description below in case you haven't watched it already. But in this video, I primarily want to discuss these three books because these are the final three from the shortlist that I've read most recently. And I purposefully read these together because all of these are very imaginative in how they combine information from history with mythology and legend and folklore to tell a new kind of story. And they really fit the adventure writing brief because each of these novels take us on a physical journey through a landscape, but also through time. A couple of them are set really far in the past, and the one that's more contemporary goes into an entire other like landscape and dreamscape, but they all draw imaginatively, like draw upon the past to tell these new kinds of stories. First, there is Babylonia by Constanza Casati, and this novel reimagines the life of the Assyrian Empire's only female ruler, Semiramis, who was a real historical figure born into very humble circumstances, but she rose to power to become queen of an empire. And this charts her incredible journey while also giving a sense for what life was really like in ancient Assyria in everyday life and at the courts and in battle. So it's very atmospheric and vivid in that way. But this isn't only about Semiramis, but a wide cast of characters. There's a slave named Rabat, and there's a eunuch who's a kind of spy at court, and there's a whole range of figures that Semiramis never really knows whether she can trust or not. And so something I was really glad about in this book, that at the beginning there's a cast of characters with descriptions of each of them. So I found it really useful to continuously flip back to this and figure out who was who and jog my memory, because a lot of them have names that, you know, I'm not very familiar with, and I always find that that makes it more difficult to know who is who. But there's also a list of the Assyrian deities and descriptions of them, and many of them are referenced throughout the text as well, because this faith was kind of part of everyday life. And the novel and story shows how that is incorporated into so many of the lives of these characters, and some of them, you know, believe in these deities more than others. This novel felt a little bit to me like a cross between Game of Thrones and Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell series, because there's a lot in this novel about power play within the upper echelons of society and at court between different rulers and the dynasties of different rulers and the legitimacy of them, and about different figures at court that are plotting and scheming against each other. But there are also battles in this, and it shows the horrors of war in a lot of detail, and so it made this feel very tangible and real. But of course, at the center of this story is Semiramis, and following her story and how she rises to power through in education, through learning about of how to read, but also about sportsmanship and how to physically fight herself, but also about political cunning and figuring out a way to navigate through this very treacherous and dangerous society. I also really like how the Epic of Gilgamesh is kind of threaded throughout this story. There are quotes from this which kind of set a template of how things might play out. But it's not only that Semiramis is familiar with the Epic of Gilgamesh, but this is played out through theatrical performances and dance performances. So it shows how this ancient tale is kept alive and spread amongst people who might not be literate and definitely might not have a chance to read the tale, which isn't physically written down in its entirety. And the story really shows the tension of court life, of how secrets can be discovered and these can be tactically used in plays for power, but also how if some secrets are discovered and you're not supposed to know them and people find out that you know about these secrets, then that could be very dangerous for you as well. And so I like how the story navigated between this knowledge or ignorance about certain secrets. I also thought it was really interesting how one of the main storylines concerns a gay relationship and how that plays out in this fight for power, but also how sexuality in general is explored in the lives of these characters through different relationships. And as I mentioned with eunuchs at court, how eunuchs were such a prevalent part of courts at this time. It's also very cool and fun that Semiramis acquires a pet leopard in this, who becomes her kind of trusted companion throughout the story when she really can't trust entirely many of the people that she encounters. So I thought this novel was really excellent overall. I could really see this becoming part of a series of books because we really only follow the rise to her power rather than when she is actually ruling the empire. And so I think that could be an entirely other story that is told in future books. Sycorax by Nydia Hetherington. And this novel, which has such a beautiful cover to it, doesn't it? This story imagines the life of a witch from Algiers who is partly based off from legend and rumors of a witch involved in a big grand ancient battle, and partly inspired by Shakespeare's The Tempest and the character of Caliban, and it's referred to in that play how he had a mother who was a witch named Sycorax, and she's just referred to briefly in the play, but this story builds out what her life might have been like, and it does so in a really moving way because the author pours so much of her own experience into this tale as well, because Sycorax, and she is born with this physical condition, which is a genetic condition that women in her family have experienced for a long time, experiencing a lot of physical disability and challenges, all of the challenges that brings, and it brings this to life in a very vivid way throughout the story, where it's very difficult for her to get around. She needs to use a crutch to do so, and when she's confronted with a staircase, it can feel like a mountain for her to climb, whereas other characters will just be, well, it's a staircase, just climb up for it. But for her, it's a very different story. So I really appreciated how she brought that aspect of her life to the story, and there's an afterword in this, which she gives this very moving account of her experience with this, and but also an introduction to this of how she's familiar with the play of The Tempest and was always curious about the story behind this this character of Sycorax and a witch. And so she shows her life, her very isolated life, living with her parents and her upbringing in these very removed circumstances. But then through some dramatic events, it shows how she's forced to interact and integrate with some of the members of society in Algiers and gets drawn into different plays for power and within war. And so how she's drawn into these larger events that are going on, and how she is at once revered and respected for her special abilities, because she has all of these extra senses that she can kind of predict the weather, and there's a number of different things and sort of that abilities that she has that ordinary mortals don't have. But she is also sort of feared and reviled, and but she is also desired because she is a physical woman who is beautiful and desired by men. And so there's this conflict that is going on in her place within this society, that she is both embraced and rejected at various points because of the mood of the community. And I thought it was very vivid how it shows that, in the way that, this is a historical thing with witches and women in a patriarchal society where women are feared in this way. And so it evokes her life in this way. And I really got into this story, although in the beginning I did struggle with it at a bit, in that I felt it was slightly stilted in how it shows her early life and her relationship to her parents and her relationship to the elements around her. I think one of my issues with the story initially was that she relates so much more to the physical world around her and the environment rather than people themselves. And it's even commented at one point that she's more elemental than human, and that made me struggle to relate to her a bit, I think, because there are some sections where she is just basically speaking to stones and trying to imbue these stones with magic and bringing out the colors in them so that they can be sold, so that it kind of enables people's dreams to have these special stones. And so there's a lot in it initially about her communicating with stones and caring for the beehives that her father kept, and information like that. And so, yeah, I struggled slightly with that. Although something I did appreciate and really emotionally connect to early on in the book is when at a certain age in her early life, her father says, you can't work with me any longer. You need to work with your mother because you're a girl and you need to work with a woman, and how she is kind of slotted into these gender roles, which I myself found in my adolescence when I got to a certain age, and it was like, oh, you should be, with your father all the time rather than your mother. And I kind of questioned at the time, well, why are things divided on these gender lines? But then I did get into the story a lot more when she was kind of forced to become part of the larger community, and following her story thereafter. And then I found it really fascinating as it builds up inevitably, because she is designated as the mother of Caliban. We know that this story is inevitably moving towards the events of the Tempest and Caliban being isolated and enslaved on an island. And so how it builds up to that point, and the interesting narrative switch that occurs towards the end of the book to show the later events of her life, I thought that was really great and really fascinatingly done. So overall, I thought this was a really powerful novel that it took some time for me to really get into the story, but once I did, I was fully into it. And there is Water Moon by Samantha Sotto Yambao, and this novel follows a young woman named Hannah who is due to take over her father's pawn shop business, but it's not an ordinary pawn shop. It's imbued with magical qualities where customers can come in and leave behind the bad choices that they've made in their lives. But when on the day she is due to take over this business, her father has disappeared, and the pawn shop has been ransacked. And so she goes on this imaginative and magical journey to this strange realm to try to find out what happened to her father and to solve a number of different mysteries along with one of the customers from the shop. So this is a story which really indulges in the full power of the imagination and going into this whole other place where all these fantastical things occur, but which do have some real life resonance to them. It explores issues to do with like sleep and what occurs in our kind of dream life, but also this larger issue to do with our choices in life and our fates and how much in our lives we are predestined to live out because of our circumstances we are born into, and what are the consequences of the real consequences of the choices we make, even when the outcome of those choices isn't what we ideally expected, but it's more about owning up to these choices we make and realizing the real privilege of being able to make choices, because there are many other people that are born into much more difficult circumstances who have many less options than some of us do, who have certain more privileges. So it looks at bigger issues like this through a story that has lots of twists and turns to it and lots of mysteries which are eventually uncovered. So I appreciated that aspect of the story and just the full imaginative power of it. And this novel has been likened a lot to Studio Ghibli films. And yeah, it does feel very much that vibe. But I found it slightly too whimsical for my personal taste. Some of the places it went to, I just thought, oh, okay, I'll go along with it. But yeah, this is kind of like stretching my ability to feel really emotionally connected to the story. And I also struggled a bit to connect to a number of these different characters in the story, in that so many of them really felt like ciphers to discuss what the author wanted to talk about rather than being real individuals, and some of that I think that really came through in a lot of the dialogue, which I found hard to believe as things that people would actually say to each other. But I did like how the story made a number of literary references, like to Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and how that incorporates that and those ideas into the story and going into this world of the imagination. But on the whole, I have to say that this story didn't entirely work for me personally. I was glad to have read it. It's something very different than what I normally read, but yeah, it wasn't quite for me. So now I'm going to give my ranking of these 6 novels and which book I hope is going to win the Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize. And as you may expect from what I just said about this book, that Water Moon was my least favorite of all of these novels for all the reasons that I just gave, and that it just really wasn't for me personally. There were some larger issues and ideas in the story that I appreciated, but it was just a bit too whimsical for me. The rest of the books are really hard to choose from and rank because I enjoyed them so much. But in 5th place, I would put Redemption by Jack Jordan. And I had so much fun reading this. I was really gripped all the way throughout this story of revenge, which is a very different kind of tale from the rest of these novels. And it is a thriller that with each scene as it revolves between the 3 main characters of this story, I was so gripped and wanting to know what was going to happen next. But there were some aspects of kind of the characters and the choices they make which are more like serving the thrilling aspect of this plot than I think are, necessarily fully about the psychology of these characters, although the author does a really good job about building up their motivations and why they are doing the really extreme things that they are doing in this story, primarily centered around a woman who's grieving for her lost son and who has this sense that there's such an injustice that has been done, that the only choice she has is to kill her son's killer herself. And so following through that and with the drama of that story in this very atmospheric way while these wildfires are going on. So I was really captivated by this story. But yes, I think if I was forced to choose a ranking, I would put it in 5th place. In 4th place, I would put Sycorax, which I did think was great, that it was so moving how the author brings her own experience into this story while also telling this fantastical tale about a witch. But as I said, there were some slow parts early on in the novel, and also I couldn't help comparing this novel to Circe, Madeline Miller's novel, which is also about a legendary witch. And I kind of preferred Circe, but yeah, I think this novel does stand on its own and does some really innovative things. In 3rd place, I would put A House for Miss Pauline, which I'm a sucker for stories about a spirited older woman and following the main character of this story who is 100 years old in Jamaica, and the story of her life and her lineage and a secret that she holds, which unfolds over the course of the novel, and following her character who is still continuing to grow and change, despite her later age, and but it still has so much life in her. And I found her such a compelling character. And as this looks into the history of colonialism in Jamaica and the influence it's had upon so many people's lives and families continuously over time, it's so well done. In 2nd place, this is really difficult to choose between these two novels, and if I were a judge of this award, I would have a really difficult time picking between them because I think they are both excellent in very different ways. But if I was forced to choose, I would probably pick Babylonia as 2nd place. I'm only very narrowly because I've talked already about why I appreciate this novel so much and how it's so rich and involving, and it really compelled me all the way through. So I think this is a great book, and I'd love to read more by this author, and I hope she continues writing about this character and this time period. But I would pick as number 1 fundamentally for a number of reasons. Partly because the main character of this, she is kind of flawed in a way which I don't think the main character of Babylonia is entirely allowed to the author allows her to be, because she's so sympathetic to the main character. And fundamentally, the main character of this is really complicated and flawed, but I still felt really connected to her and was rooting for her, and she has such a sense of humor, as a way of handling her story and exploring really difficult and challenging subject matter about religion and relationships and extremism in our society, and how Nussaibah Younis deals with this in her novel. I think it's just so well done that this is a contemporary set story which has so much relevance and is such a different way of looking at a number of different issues, and a character that I felt so close to by the end of the story. So I would pick this as my winner for the Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize when it is announced on September 11th, and we will see if I'm right or not. But I'll be really excited to see the results, whatever they are. So as I said, I would love to know your thoughts about any of these books, or if you're interested in reading any of them now, and who you think might win win, yeah, we will see very soon. But thank you for watching me discuss all these books and following through the season of this year's award. It's been really great discussing all of these titles with many of you and hearing your different thoughts about them. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.